I work seriously on today's lecture. Every lecture is the most important lecture of the sequence. So today is at once different, but also no different because it's so important. It has three parts. The first is about, in fact, I hinted at the first part. It is about how from movement we get the idea of the physics of wealth. Both of them underpinned by the same undeniable phenomenon, which is the natural birth of hierarchy. On the map, hierarchy. So that's the first part. The second part is, it's funny, I'm like the maternity ward, the birth of this. Next is the birth of the beltway around the city. Meaning beltways happen. And then the third is about the physics of attractiveness, also known as beauty. They all go together, and that's the pleasant surprise. I keep telling you, there's only one idea, but the idea takes, like the ball, funny bounces, like in your intramural. They should, basketball has become boring. They should start playing basketball with an ellipsoidal ball. That would be a lot, like in rugby. That would be a lot more fun. Usher in the unexpected. Okay, so part number one. The message of Monday's lecture was that from the urge to move stuff on an area with less fuel emerges a drawing, a map, this known as roadmap. And this roadmap consists of a few large and many small pathways. The large ones are traveled by big movers, smaller ones, more numerous, by smaller movers. So that's the birth of hierarchy. Few large and many small. By the way, I sent you the PDFs of that underpinned the last lecture. I hope you've lived through those. You don't have to redo them, but that's your reading material that's more recent than the textbook that you use. And so a hierarchical display of movement. And then I promised you the discovery that I made while looking at the money people pay to make this movement possible. The money represents wealth. I told you the saying, have money will travel. And sure enough, from the economics literature, one gets lots of data indicating the following. The annual measure of wealth is called gross domestic product, GDP. So this is annual. And on the abscissa, this is a logarithmic scale. On the abscissa is the annual consumption of fuel reported by every country on the globe. So that's called annual energy. But energy means tons of oil equivalent, which means the consumption of fuel. And this particular graph starts from 1 and 1, and you'll see I brought for you these charts to look at. And all the countries of the world crowd themselves on this diagonal with a slope of 1, meaning that consumption of fuel in order to move stuff is synonymous with what people report as wealth, money spent annually. So if the consumption of fuel for movement is hierarchical on the landscape, so is the expenditure of money, meaning wealth. You know this very well. I mean, to have a moving truck company, you need big money. It's not like your, let's say, bicycle or something else you ride. Movement, wealth, but the big aha is the hierarchy, which I wrote here. Hierarchy. There's a companion drawing using the same data as in this cloud. Another drawing that I made, which is both abscissa and the ordinate expressed per capita, meaning here at the top of the cloud you expect the bigger countries, the U.S., China, Japan, these places, the United Kingdom. Yeah, but the populations vary, and sure enough, so this is GDP per capita, and here fuel per capita, and capita means counting heads. Also annual. And you get the same distribution on the diagonal. It is a bit fuzzier. Instead of a narrow cloud, a somewhat fatter hot dog on the stick. But it's the same idea that the wealthier burn more, and the purpose for that so-called consumption of fuel is to move stuff. I hope you got by now the idea that life is movement, because the antonym, no movement, is death. And that brings me to the first joke of the day. You hear people arguing in favor of reducing the consumption of fuel. That is, as physics, an argument for reducing life, movement. And it is for that reason that no living group is reducing the consumption of fuel, and never will. The history of humanity is about a invention by invention progression toward greater movement. Everything from the most primitive to the adoption of fire, adoption of clothing, boating, all these things, domesticated animals. Slavery, by the way, is a part of the same design from antiquity. And only through the invention of the steam engine, the advanced societies were able to abolish slavery. If anybody asks you about the contributions of engineering to civilization, the end of slavery is one of them. Because the idea of freeing the slaves is as old as the Bible. I mean, there were people back then who knew right from wrong and tried to put an end to it, but the population at large was not able to afford it. The reason I made these copies is to show you what happens if you look at the bottom graph, the one where these measurements are indicated per capita. You look on the bottom graph at the consumption of fuel stretching upward from Russia to Japan. So individual from Russia is consuming the same amount of fuel as the Japanese. But when it comes to wealth, which is proportional to movement, the Japanese is moving 20 times more. And the reason for that is the history of the two societies. Japan in the, I think it was around 1860, embraced Western designs, including technology. It's known as the era of the Emperor Meiji. And much to everybody's surprise, in the early 20s, Japan became the first country to be completely electrified. Electrification did not happen, continuously like a well-woven carpet where steam power came from, which was Britain. It did not happen in the U.S. Oil lamps were still burning in the U.S., as were in Europe. So think about it. A 20 times factor when it comes to moving stuff, including life and the people, in comparison with well, obviously, Russia. The data are from, they speak of communism, which was a design of not moving much. Incidentally, if you get this idea, then other forms of movement or enhancing movement emerge as belonging to the same reasoning. I mentioned domestication of animals, agriculture, which is providing more, fuel, meaning food in the tummies of all these workers. And then the ability of those who do not have commodity A, called fuel, is enhanced if they have an abundance of another commodity, for example, meat from raising animals. And so as societies evolved and expanded, various groups outperformed their neighbors. They had extra, and that's how commerce or trade became a natural phenomenon. First, it was in kind, your goat for my sacks of grain. And then later, when the surplus was beyond the ability of individuals to carry over the fence, banking became the natural solution.